It's time for another episode of the Quaggling Sand Podcast, recorded on this day, 27 August, 2021. By my calculations, that's a Friday. I don't always do those maths correctly, but I think I got it this time. You can hear my voice is enjoying the low-level ozone increases that we've had here in lovely Las Vegas, thanks to the smoke and other particulates from the various fires burning in the western part of the United States. So do forgive me and my, as always, labored attempts at speaking into this microphone. So another Friday, another week gone by, another opportunity to fall behind on my schedule again. So there are a couple things. First of all, I am moving, so that's always a distraction. Pardon me. Hopefully that will last for a while. So moving is always fun. I have 1 week remaining, 1 week and 2 days, technically. So it should be a little frantic, but well, we'll see. We'll see if I got it under control. We're down to the physical packing. So the logistics, the storing and the moving and the driving and the getting my glasses prescription updated for the distance driving, because I had gone way too long, especially in the days of the pandemic. But I have now, I can see clearly now. The rain is gone. So that's very nice. And in addition, one of the topics for today will be the joy of using a platform API from a third party. I don't know if you've ever done that. Hopefully you have been deep diving into the various programmable web, I think is a website, programmableweb.com. And one of my colleagues from Intel sends out a newsletter using Paper.li, I believe, the API newsletter every day. Every morning I get an email with various web APIs. It's very nice. So APIs are cool. It's usually larger companies will have wrappers exposing their API with some traditional, I guess, calling methods, programmatic interface. So you can use JavaScript and you can install it with NPM or whatever. Python, maybe they'll stick it up in PyPy. Do they pronounce that PyPy? PyPI? Whatever it is. The Go, wherever Go keeps their stuff, Rust, whatever, PHP. Usually there will be at least JavaScript, PHP, Python, or at least Python. Anyway, so where am I going with this? I'll tell you where I'm going. So the show notes I had been publishing in Substack as a newsletter, in addition to posting the podcast on Anchor, because it was kind of an experiment to see if that was useful or. And then I would do a weekend edition of the sort of a where did the week take me. And ideally, there would have been a, hey, here's who's going to join us for the next podcast. And that might happen someday. Who knows? But publishing the two newsletters on two different newsletter platforms probably was confusing. I have a feeling someone who subscribed to one didn't subscribe to the other, thinking they were the same. It's a very small set of people in general, so or two sets, and the overlap is even smaller, the intersection. So I could certainly ask, but here's the thing: I've been publishing in that scheme, so an early in the week show notes, or Monday newsletter in the case of danhugo.substack.com, and then the Thursday newsletter via getreview.co, I think it is. So, but then also for the Hugo Floss podcast, for the FFS Talk podcast, and for this Quaggling Sand podcast, I was doing the same early in the week, late in the week, weekend edition type thing with the two platforms. So after giving that a few weeks of trial, I came away with some pros and cons. And one of the reasons I was doing this is because I would like to make use of, I don't want to do like a constant contact, MailChimp sort of email barrage about marketing stuff, much more oriented towards updating. And I'll give you the couple of contexts for that. But in the meantime, so when I was evaluating, and I only chose these two platforms because Substack has gotten a lot of press lately, literally. Independent media individuals are jumping over to Substack. Matt Taibbi, Aaron Mate. I'm spacing on some names. But anyway, so Substack is kind of catching on for that. And so I gave it a try. And I just mentioned Paperly. There are a couple of newsletter platforms. Some are free. Some have a free tier. Some, even Review is not free if you go over 50 subscribers. Substack, I'm not sure what the cutoff is for subscribers. Sadly, I am not in a position to worry about that just yet. But anyway, so I went with Review because I was interested to see what, Twitter bought them. A little water, thank you. So Twitter bought them, so I wanted to see what they were doing with it. So the bottom line was Review has an API and integrations. So if you've never used Review, good for you. There's like a sidebar that will, I guess it's like an inbox. They call it an inbox. And you can add things to the sidebar, objects or items, I guess. And you can drag so you can't programmatically generate and send a newsletter issue, but you can, through the API or these integrations, you can have elements drawn into or put into your inbox, and then you can construct an issue, create image artwork like a thumb, and send it. Substack does not allow this, so not only does Substack not have anything similar for drawing in other pieces of content, and I don't mean to sound so corporate, but that is the parlance of the day. So Substack has no API, and they have no intention of having an API, and while the editor for Substack is a little bit more, or I guess I'll say a little bit less opinionated, seems to be sort of a typical browser, JavaScript, WYSIWYG, HTML editor. The downside of that is it's a little bit buggy. I've noticed copy paste of content from a previous newsletter. There'll be double and triple spaces inserted between words, almost like it's trying to justify paragraphs or something. And there are a couple of other issues, but basically it's very unopinionated. Whereas Review, you add a section, H1, they call it a header? I think a header. H1 header, and that adds a H1 header text element that you can then fill in. And then you can add a text item, I guess, and you can add a image, media, and you can add a URL. So you add these things, you kind of append them, and you can drag and drop them, reorder them. It's sort of weird, but I mean it's okay. It's not bad, but it is a little bit more opinionated in the way you're constructing a document to become an issue that you're going to send out. The API allows you to add to your inbox a programmatically generated URL, image, header, header or heading, I can't remember, or text. The way you do that is with there's an endpoint for the API, and one of them, one of the RESTful endpoint, what do you call the? I always think of the endpoint as like the root, the base URL, but I guess there's an endpoint for each API call. So there's a post item, or there's I think it's add item, but it's a post. So I just called it. So, oh, by the way, there is no Python, nor I think somebody external made a PHP wrapper, and there's a JavaScript wrapper, I think, somewhere. But I didn't really see any example code or anything. So I figured out I haven't done this in a while, so I made a Pythonic. I say Pythonic, but to me, Pythonic classes for the objects, and a class wrapping the API interaction. So you create a new instance of the review API with your credentials, and then you tell it to engage the endpoints with your parameters, and it returns objects that it builds and all that stuff. So pretty basic. So a couple things. First of all, it doesn't implement a lot of things that I would hope it would. Once I was seeing what it does to that sidebar, I was like, oh, okay, I guess in keeping with the opinionated nature of the issue construction workflow. Okay. Not really what I was hoping for, but certainly my use case, which I will get into in a moment, and then I will get into why I'm doing newsletters. So it's not perfect, but it's also, it's not going to be the review is not going to be the end all and be all platform into the distant future. So for now, it's okay. My goal really is to programmatically add objects from, say, a blog or some other content source. Now, they do have RSS integration, which I have not really tried yet, so this may address some of my concerns. But the problem I was having was their API, as documented, it's version 2. Their API does not do what it says on the tin. Case in point, the multi-part form submission, the body of your post for the new item, add an item. So again, this will add an item to your inbox, which is displayed on the sidebar when you're editing a new issue, and you can literally drag an item from that sidebar into your newsletter and then move them around and all that stuff. So it does make the actual laying out of an issue a little bit nicer. Like, I can imagine it would be something of a nightmare to try to programmatically, especially if there are multiple integrations, including API calls, trying to insert things directly. So having a human editor putting everything together before it gets sent out, not an awful idea. So the possibilities as documented are issue ID, which is passed in the body of the post of the request, and it's also passed in the URL. So that's strange, and it's also called ID in the URL and issue ID _ID in the documentation of the body structure, and then you pass a URL if it's a link. And then the instructions there say, if you're creating a link item, you don't have to do anything else. And then you can also submit a image, which is base64 encoded image data. So a string of picture. And then, what's the other one? I'm not looking at the docs right now because I hate them. But I think it was type, which is enumerated, can be header or heading, text, and image. And then caption, which is only applicable for image. And I think that was it. So in case you're wondering, like I was, well, what if I'm submitting text? Where do I put the text? And so I tried various things like HTML, and because when you get, what was I doing? When you get a previous issue, you can get issues, and you'll get a list of issues. Is JSON objects, a list of them, and you can see, HTML is one of the keys. So I figured, okay, so maybe it's HTML, maybe it's description, which you can pass. You can pass title and description. Neither of those are in the documentation for the post call for item. And the fun part is if you pass type, give type the value of text or heading or header, whichever it is. If you pass, according to the documentation, one of the enumerated values for the type key, I don't know what you call them in JSON, key, attribute, you get a type, unrecognized or illegal value, unsupported, one of those. So yeah, documentation is incorrect. Also, somewhere in the documentation, it says ID is they're kind of using JSON schema-ish, although they don't use JSON schema syntax. That would be convenient, but they use well, anyway. So they indicate that ID star, so it's required, is a string in one of the pieces of documentation. The rest of the cases, the rest of the instances of that are number, so that's simple numeric ID. So that was annoying. So there are a couple problems. I had I created a JSON schema for each of the calls, and so I validate my input against that, and so I caught the string number thing because I created my, oh wait, why is that string in the number? Okay, so fixed, piece of cake. Anyway, so there are a couple of problems along those lines, right? So the take home is Review did not test this. They published their documentation without actually trying it. And since there's no sample code, and in fact they have like, for each call, they have what the response will be, the response JSON, and they have an example tab, and it is basically the same as the response. So it's not real work is being shown. But the bottom line is, I don't think they've actually tested it, not very well, and it is version 2, so that's troubling. So I contacted support and said, hey, I asked about one of these things, and after I sent the note, I found some other issues because, again, I wrote a somewhat complete Python wrapper around their API, and I was trying it, testing it out, and I found some problems. Shortcomings was the word I used after. So I got an email from the email sender name was like a person name, like a name you would find attached to a person on Earth. But the email sender name and the sign, the signature at the bottom, was it was from Anakin. So the whole exchange was very difficult to me because a company like Twitter, I'm sort of hoping that they have one person that tries out the API for this service, because they're certainly integrating it into Twitter. They now have an announcement for your newsletter at the top of your account. So if you visit my Twitter account on Dan Hugo on Twitter, at Dan Hugo, twitter.com/Dan Hugo, DANHUGO. If you go there, I think at the top you'll see subscribe to the Thursday newsletter. And there you go. So some of the things they're doing, but if you're not testing your code or your published APIs, or who knows what. So So the reason I want to, first of all, I don't like the idea of creating the newsletter on a different platform. So it would be nice, and I don't know if you've ever tried, I think Zurb, Z-U-R-B, still has a rich HTML, like markup language that then transforms into legal cross email client, sort of intersection of all the crappy implementations. I think Outlook being the worst, supposedly. So I think Zurb has one, and I actually started using more of the Mailjet MJML. Similar idea. You mark up your message or template with their MJML, then you run a transform. At some point, I would like to actually try like a XSLT, just to polish up my or blow the dust off, I suppose, my skills of XML and transformations and whatnot. So, but yeah, so you can construct a nice message, rich HTML, compatible, visually pleasant email message, rich HTML email, and send them and all that. So it'd be nice if that was completely automated. If I could create my own MJML probably template, programmatically fill in the emails. I have actually sent emails that are generated from that. It works great. So there's even a VS Code plugin for MJML from the folks at Mailjet. Not a sponsor. So I would like to be able to construct the newsletter on my end and submit it. Now, I guess they lose some of their value add, so maybe that's their thing. We'll see. But I would like to have a more coherent notion of, like, I want to add an object with the title, I guess. Even though it's not documented, you can add an object with the item post with a title key or attribute, and it will be the title. I don't know if it ends up being like an H2 tag in a section that's H1 section, which I cannot add because the type is illegal, even though it's documented. So yeah, there's a little bit of a headache, but also because of the opinionated nature, it's not totally sensible in my opinion, but I'm also opinionated, obviously. So, so one of the reasons I was exploring newsletters in general is I want to, there are many technologies at our disposal to engage a potential customer, for example, or fans, followers, all that. So RSS feeds, which I've already said before, which I would like to see kind of be deprecated or kind of become sort of like a sitemap, right? Like stop sticking more and more stuff in there. Just because the schema.org project and Open Graph, these are ways to add an RDFA, I guess, which schema.org supports, JSON LD. There are ways to, and then item, the whole HTML5 data attributes and all that. So you can add metadata and interesting structure to the side of the internet that is aimed at humans. So you can use the same exact content and then add some hints for a machine parser that can go through and see, oh, that's the title of the podcast, or that's the author of the article, and that's the publication date and all that stuff. So you can, rather than having a completely separate RSS or Atom feed with the namespaced extensions and all that, you can use this broadly, like, kind of heavy, in my opinion. There's a lot of item data types, I guess, in schema.org, for example. Open Graph is a little weirder. Facebook kind of chopped away some of their own supported Open Graph object types, like events and stuff, as far as publishing them. Anyway, the point is, there are RSS feeds, there are Atom feeds, there's schema.org and Open Graph enhanced human readable HTML content. There are iCalendar, ICS files. There are newsletters. There are notifications. There are fill in the blank, right? So there are more and more ways to reach people. And I've mentioned before, I have this plan that's been variously on the front and back burners, sometimes at the same time. Mostly on the back burner because that's a longer story, but my target customer base, mobile vendors, they are a squirrely bunch. And so it's a question of whether I focus on that and see what will come of it, or if I do other things. So a lot of what I'm trying to do now, which I've mentioned along the way in this podcast series, show, episodes, all kind of circles the drain with the mobile vending platform and other things, kind of all at the same time. So getting back to core principles, would that be reasonable? Right? So as a solopreneur, getting all this stuff working 24 hours a day, and then I work at night. So in the mobile vendor context, although there are other projects, but we'll stick with the mobile vendors, clearly it would be useful for a visually appealing newsletter generation tool that then could be sent out on a vast array of topics. If you're my customers in this on this platform are mobile vendors, so think your favorite food truck owner, your booth at the farmer's market that sells olive oil or soap or whatever, or what I call a fair truck, not a food truck, a truck that has clothing, or there used to be a really cool bus here in Vegas that was like a little clothing boutique. It was like Hot Stuff or something. There was a school bus that was sort of it looked like a thrift store inside. Kind of cool. There's a double-decker coffee bus, so that's more of a food truck. So there are all kinds of ways that mobile vendors can, obviously, at a farmer's market, they could be selling food that you can eat. They can prepare food there, depending on your local regulations. So my customers are those people, and the platform is designed to divorce them from dependence on, if you're a mobile vendor fan, you know some of the platforms out there. So let's say Street Food Finder, because I actually like that one. That one's pretty cool, but it's not quite complete. So in my view, the platform should kind of make use of all the available tools. I just listed some off before: RSS, ICS, schema.org, Open Graph, everything's shareable, everything's URL, cross-linking, all that. So if my customers, the mobile vendors, want to, say, subscribe to a newsletter about features as the platform improves over time, or local market conditions, trends, a market report kind of thing for a particular county or locality or whatever. Newcomers, like, hey, there's a new food truck in town, or hey, there's an owners association meeting, whatever, just as a service to my clients, customers. My clients or customers are not the organizers and hosts and all that. It's the mobile vendors, right? But as well, there will be people, whether they're a host or an organizer or just a fan or somebody looking for lunch. They might also want a newsletter about a particular area that's near their workplace or near their home, or a place that they like to go on weekends or whatever. So various topics. So my newsletter collection could grow to large numbers, I guess. Not, I don't know about subscribers, but but I could certainly have like a newsletter per county where there are mobile vendors. I could have a newsletter. Anyway, you can imagine there's a lot of possibilities, and that's for people who would want to get an email, right? Maybe it's a friend of mine here has a Guamese food truck, Tunu Fix, TUNUFIXX. I think it's 2 X's or maybe 3 X's. He's at the local hospital here, the medical center, in the parking lot at lunch. I think like probably 4 days a week. So if the person that's responsible for the booking at the medical center, or the person who approves it, would get an email every week, that they would subscribe to with his schedule, then they could forward that along. They could print it out, whatever. Or so there's a whole bunch of possibilities where marketing tools for my customers could be sent to their customers on their behalf to help business development for my customers, right? Does that make sense? So newsletters in the mobile vendor context, there's a couple different ways that they can be useful as a part of an overall automation of modern technologies strategy. So newsletters and the automated production of high quality newsletters are interesting to me for the purposes that I'm pursuing at present. But as well, review. So for something like that, anybody who's ever used a listserv from the old days, a major domo, easy MLM, mailman, if you're a Python fan. So there are a variety of open source tools that can, Easy MLM used to brag that they could handle all of the mailing lists. Easy Mailing List Manager. It was basically designed to work with Qmail, which was a version of SendMail. But, either way, probably I would start off with Mailman just because I am a big Python fan, but, we'll see. So review has its place because I can very quickly, say we kick off, I'm still filing paperwork / moving, so I have to create a legal entity in a place where I will not be living for 6 weeks. So I have to use a registrar service. Anyway, so a quick sign up, right? Like my one pager, my starter project, which should work. It's pretty. I was going through my infrastructure stuff yesterday, so I want to try to do a whole Terraform apply and see if I can get to a functional starter. So on that starter, it would be nice if somebody could sign up for updates on, as we launch the real site after the one pager or the starter, right? So something like review has its place because it would be a subscription to that platform, not signing up for some other service or whatever. So it's an idea. It's something that I could get up and running without having to, at the starter phase, deploy a listserv and an MTA, mail transfer agent, and all the other stuff, right? Databases and everything. So if I can just say, hey, you want to subscribe and get updates as we launch our project, whether it's Casa Nunzia or whether it's, did I mention that, Casa Nunzia? Or whether it's one of my mobile vendor, whatever it is, the starter page could very easily have a sign up, enter your email address here, and you'll get a newsletter blast as we, hey, you want to be an alpha tester, you want to be beta, whatever, right? So it has a place, and to be able to generate content was the goal, short term, so that it could fit into the overarching plan, which I do have. It's probably even written down somewhere. So, but it's disheartening to see Twitter, their property review, get review or something, not tested for something like this. It's troubling. And then the response I got was kind of, hey, yeah, thanks. We like getting feedback from you. It was very boilerplate, very generic. I got a similar response from a fintech, online bank that I recently signed up with for business accounting. They're very uptight about verifying business credentials, your EIN and your business license documentation, business, your legal entity document, all this stuff. So they verify you're a legitimate business. You have to send them your ID and all that, and then you're up and running. So, prove you are you and all that. Well, that's nice. And then they started doing email confirmation. So if you haven't signed in 30 days or something, you get you're being sent a code and you have to enter. Okay, great. Once a month, I guess, not too bad. But I said, well, so have you guys explored like UTF? What did I say? U2F, Universal Two-Factor. U2FA, 2FA, whatever they call it now. I have my YubiKeys. I have my, what is it? TOTP app on my phone. Actually, I use Bitwarden to tie that together. It's pretty useful. But I also, Google Authenticator, whatever. So I'm like, okay, the email, okay, well, kind of, it is 2021. We have the technology. And the response I got when I mentioned that a while ago was kind of like what I got yesterday when they said, hey, to help with email security, make sure when you get an email from us, it always is from this domain. And I was thinking, seriously? So that was just it kind of happened at the same time with my review situation, which is I don't know that the people... I think that the engineers are in their cubicles. Maybe they should talk more to the people on the front line sending out these emails, or because I got the email from review that said, hey, thanks for making a note, and I'll pass this on to our whatever team, and we like getting feedback from our users. And that was it. And I said that's very strange, because as I developed my Python wrapper, I found a lot of shortcomings, and I've been doing this for like 30 years. And I was sort of shocked at how half-baked. Yeah. With the case of the fintech thing, I said I got a response that was very similar. Very boilerplate, very, hey, thanks for reaching out. That's a great idea. We love getting feedback, blah, 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 blah. So I respond, oh, and by the way, they send you a survey right after. How did this possibly fake name, who knows? And they give you like a little mini bio, so maybe it's a real human, who knows? And I said it was not a useful response, and I included my PGP because my response to their email about the check the domain, I said, we have PKI, public key infrastructure. Why not sign emails, for example? You could encrypt them. If you're going to send me some sort of a code, you should send it to me encrypted and signed. And then I know it's really from you, and that I should really enter this code that has not been intercepted with a man-in-the-middle attack, right? So Eve, I think, in the middle. Alice to Bob, and then Eve in the middle, I think. So, yeah, I sent my PGP public key, and I said, here, why don't you, next time you respond to me, why don't you, I signed the email I sent them. So I said, here's my key. Why don't you check my signature, and you can encrypt a message to me. How about that? So, yeah, I'm smart ass. So, yeah, I'm not totally excited by look at the T-Mobile breach. Why are they storing people's social security number, which I don't know if they know this, but if you're storing people's birthdays and names and address and social security number and all that, but hey, nobody got your credit card number. Like, yeah, but they can go get their own in my name now, right? That's a problem. Now they know the magic last 4 digits, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a problem. I'm trying to close my account at Southwest Airlines, and it's taken 2 months now, and I'm still getting, it's not working. I'm like, I don't want to do business with you. Close my account. And they don't. I guess they don't feel like it. So someday when Southwest Airlines is breached, I'll be in that bolus as well, even if I'm not a customer anymore. Please delete me. And they will not. And I'll be on, at this point, Social Security number doesn't even matter, except that it does. So I guess I'm venting a little frustration at that, at this bend, the bend around the bend as we approach the finish line. So story time, kind of along these lines. It was when I worked at Intel in the Maker Innovator group, we were doing the Galileo, Edison, Arduino 101, and then the Joule never really got off the ground. But the Edison was like, that was the board. And to be honest, to be perfectly frank, right now I have an Edison board on my desk. I'm looking at it right now. So the Edison was, I thought it was a cool little device. It was end of life too quickly, so whatever Linux is running on there will never get the love it needs to get security updates and whatnot. But, excuse me, I had to get some water there. So I had the good fortune to go to Toulouse and work with the engineering team that was launching it and got to know everybody. And, we're building the Yocto image and all this stuff. And wait, did they use Yocto? No, they used, what the hell did they use? Galileo used a Yocto image. What did they use? I can't remember. Maybe it was a Yocto image. I can't remember. It's been too long now. So I was very hands-on with the team that was making the product. I became very familiar with how everything worked. I was there for about 2 weeks. Aside from, communicating. Well, once you meet them, then you talk to them all the time, which I did. So then I would go to hackathons and I would, Intel sponsored or otherwise. Sometimes, Intel sponsored because they would send hardware, but sometimes it was an Intel IoT. What do they call it? They didn't call it an IoT hackathon. They called it something else, but it was an IoT hackathon, usually at a co-working space, various places around the country. We were at, where were we? We were not at Kickstarter in Brooklyn, but we were at somewhere else in New York. We were at Kickstarter in Brooklyn for another event. Everywhere, all over the place. It was very fun, actually. So it was me, and then it was a group of people from the Developer Relations Group, DRG. And they were based in Oregon, and they would host these hackathons, or they would go, if it wasn't an Intel event, it would be an Intel sponsor, one of many sponsors, and they would be there to support people and try to help them develop on Intel platforms. So yay, go Intel. That was a throat clearing for effect. So we had people with the best of intentions and who were very qualified. So this is not a dig on the individuals. Generally, they were very smart, very motivated, very cool, very nice people. So no problem there. Except every once in a while, there would be someone, especially if they were like a manager, maybe 1 or 2 levels above the crew that I was working with from DRG, right? These are maker type people that were, if they were sitting in their cube in Oregon, they probably had a circuit board and a breadboard and some wires and a power supply, right? But when managers were going to these hackathons and they would try to help out, they would tell people wrong things. And so I was at a hackathon in somewhere in Southern California, and I cannot remember where it was, in a co-working space. It was very nice. And there was a kid, and when I say kid, I just mean somebody younger than me. I don't know, could have been 35 years old. There was someone who was working at a table. I think he was by himself by the end. Whoever he was working with probably called it a night. The Intel events would end at 8 p.m., I think, and then they would pick up, or maybe midnight. I think probably midnight. It's Friday night. Pick up again Saturday morning, or whatever. So it wasn't a 48 hour or whatever, like Pen Apps or something. So it was closing time. Pack up. You can leave whatever here, or take it with you. Be back in the morning. Blah blah blah. Guy's got his head on his hand, elbow on the table, like frustrated, angst-ridden. And he said, I cannot get this thing to work. And he was trying to get his Edison board to, there's a serial port. They are using the Arduino APIs. You could open a serial port, and I do not remember the names at this point in time. Many years have passed. But you can open a serial port and, UART, whatever, and everything's fine. And it's these pins over here. But he was using whatever the shield, I guess, was that he plugged in with a GPS device on it, or maybe it was a cellular, whatever it was. It was a serial interface device, UART. It was attaching to the second UART that was on the Edison. And so in the API, there was the UART calls, and then there were additional calls to handle the additional UART that was in the Edison, and that was like UART 1, if the other one was just UART, as in like a missing zero. Like, oh, we have an extra UART, so UART 1. And honestly, I don't know if that's how Arduino, like Ultra Mega, I don't know if it has second UART. Anyway, I don't know if that was a standard thing. But the bottom line was this. Someone, and I'm not going to say who, but someone had told this person, just do this, and then walked away, didn't sit with him and make sure it worked. And so when I walked up to him, and it's closing time. We're getting ready to go. Come back tomorrow morning. And he just looks really frustrated, like he's pulled out all of his hair and he's just angst-ridden, very frustrated, and it can be frustrating. I said, what's the matter? I can't get this to work. And I looked at what he was doing, and I was like, are you using UART 1? And he looked at me like, what? So something like 20 seconds of effort with the correct answers, and he was up and running. So at least he was able to leave recovering a little bit from the hours of frustration. And this was because someone didn't, I'm going to be harsh here, someone didn't care enough to make sure that the information they gave him was correct. And on top of I could go on at length. I don't know if that's proper to do. It'll sound like sour grapes, but in this case, it was like a very human moment where I think if you're going to answer somebody, if you're going to be dismissive about it, which was the case with the fintech thing and the review response that I got today, boilerplate, or essentially the situation this kid found himself in was, hey, I have a thoughtful question with a real issue that I'm trying to address here, and I'm submitting it to you. Maybe you will tell me something useful. And the response he got was, hey, thanks for letting us know. You should try this UART call, right? And then, a couple of hours later, I mean, literally, he probably was told that, say, 8 p.m., if he was up and running and trying to integrate this other peripheral after playing with the board for a while and doing whatever he's doing. So, probably second half of the first day, but so I'm hoping he didn't open the box and have this problem for 8 hours or 10 hours. But the response he got was, I mean, if it was an email, it was probably sent from no reply at notveryhelpful.org. So it's a moment that I remember, and it's moments. I often tell people that my time with Intel as a mentor or technical liaison or whatever I was. I don't know. I was a software architect and a technical liaison. If you look at my business cards, but by the way, I went through like 3,000 business cards. The time I mean, people would laugh at me. Why do you have business cards? I'm like, I don't have any. I'm out. Everybody else has them. But I was always interested in engaging with people that were using the products, because the people that were using the products that I was actually working on in the lab, I was in Ireland on the Galileo. I was in Toulouse in France. I was in Leixlip, Ireland, if you must know. IR5. I spent more time in IR5 than any other Intel building for my time at Intel, for what that's worth. And so I have another podcast called FFS. So the take home though was that if I'm going to be in a lab, power on, I think they call it at Intel, but bring up a new system, and I'm at I'm spending 6 weeks living in Ireland, and then back and forth there several times. I'm in Toulouse for a couple weeks, and then I'm talking to those people here and there as issues arise and whatnot. And then the Arduino 101 board, which was based on the short-lived Curie part, and then our reality show. And so when you work on something and then you sit with someone who's using your product, right? I wasn't sending them an email from do not reply at nothelpful.org, whatever I said. I was sitting next to a kid who was 10 or I usually say 7 or 70. I don't think I ever worked with somebody 7 years old, but I did work with a couple that was 70-ish years old when we were in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We were at a green co-working space, and I cannot remember the name of the space, but it was in Cambridge, very near MIT and all that. So yeah, the 70-year-old couple wanted to play with Edison, and they made a little device for hotel rooms for people who, if there's an emergency, it would detect smoke or whatever, and then it would like connect to the hotel wireless and send a message to the kids, and it was pretty cool. And they said, yeah, this happened to us. And we were like, hey, maybe we could make a thing so next time the kids won't have to worry. No, they would still worry, but so that was cool. So I always tell people, I worked with people from 7 to 70, kids of all ages. And when you sit with people or when you interact with them, and same goes with mobile vendors, right? I've been to so many food trucks in so many places, and so many mobile vendors in general: tents, booths, carts, trucks, trailers, airplanes, bikes, boats. So I've talked to these people so much, and I think the value comes from that interaction, because user stories are fine, but when you get them from the users, or when you're sitting next to a user trying to get the product that you worked on to work, it's very educational. And so I find it very frustrating to see that disconnect, which happens so often. And that is where Casa Ninja comes in for assistive technology development. That's where my own efforts, I would rather not just launch and hope for the best. And that's why everything gets backburnered so often. Yeah, I think if there's one thing I've learned in my travels, it's I hate to go Steve Jobs, but honor the user, honor the customer, and don't give them boiler. What is it? They can smell your agenda like it's poop on a shoe if you're a Tao of Steve fan. Donald Logue. Anyway, so that's my story. That sort of thing happened a lot, and it was not enough to completely offset the many positives of my experience while I was at Intel in the Maker Innovator Group, but it was that a company that is looking for multi-million-dollar or unit quarterly orders doesn't have the cultural interface to work with a 15-year-old, say. That was one of the contestants in the reality show. One of my teams that I worked with was one person, 15 years old. Intel does not know, nor do most companies. Intel does not know how to deal with that. Adafruit, Arduino, Raspberry Pi, yes. Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, no. Samsung, probably not. They have, was it Smarter Things? They were at hackathons too. So that was the take home, and that's my story. And that is probably at least an excuse for why I'm always behind and I've never gotten some of my exciting ideas out into the world, because I have some sort of imposter syndrome, I guess. And I always feel like I wish I had another person to bounce it off of, but who knows if another person I bounce it off of would just give me a boilerplate response from do not reply at nothelpful.org. Maybe, I wonder if nothelpful.org is available. I'll have to check. Or you check. Let me know. That is it. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, first of all, the show notes, that whole concept is going to merge or consolidate into a review-based newsletter. And that is on the way to a self-published, self-hosted, everything. The podcast is still on Anchor. The newsletter will still be through review, a website, and a self-hosted RSS feed, and properly augmented, human-readable, embedded item-scoped data and open graph and all that is coming. The one-pager, all these things, they all fit together as part of this master plan to change the world. Don't forget buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo if you want to buy me a coffee. That would be great. Or you can just see, I'm going to update the links to the newsletters and whatnot this weekend. So keep an eye out for that, I guess. And so the Weekender or Weekend Edition or whatever I call the Quad Sand one and the show notes newsletter will merge into a review-based newsletter. And then ideally, the newsletter will be from one platform. It will mention podcasts, but I don't want to really do a show notes newsletter. I think the newsletter should have a link to one or more podcast episodes or zero, and then use a proper website hosted content to store this stuff and to make it more easily accessible, not hide it away in newsletters, all that stuff. So anyway, that I'm dragging out my approach here. We're coming up on an hour. So maybe I'll come in just under the wire. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sharing this with your friends and colleagues. Hey, if you want to come on and talk about what you're working on, send me an email to join@quaglingsand.com. That will still come to me, but if you want to join for an episode and we can rap about what your projects are, what my projects are, you can tell me I'm nuts for wanting to work with food truck people, mobile vendors. You can, maybe you have an assistive technology idea and you want to be a part of the Casa Ninja project, a nonprofit, eventually a public charity to foster co-creation of assistive technologies between actual users and the companies that make them. You see how all this fits together? Yeah. Anyway, thank you. And next week will be my final week in Las Vegas for almost 2 months. And then I'll be back. So somewhere in there, I'll probably do some audio. But I really want to get the online tools and newsletters moving. So maybe I'll try to push for some guests if I'm going to have to be remote. But okay, for real this time. Have a good weekend, week/weekend, and I'll be back next week and soon after.